Hi, I'm John Arul Phillips. I'm the Dean of the School of Education and Cognitive Science, Asia University. The title of my presentation is Transitioning to Hybrid Learning, to hybrid blended learning, to hybrid blended learning and teaching. Uh, This is an area that is confronting a lot of educationists today. Now, the online, let's look at a little bit about the background to, to what all this thing about online learning. During the pandemic, around it's already going to the second year, there was a sudden rush to online learning simply because educational institutions had to close down. Education institutions from kindergarten right up to university, even training institutions had to close because of the pandemic. Now it looks like we are, and online learning was the thing, and there was a lot of confusion among educationists. Things like what is online learning, how do I go about it, and quite a bit of them did not really have any training in online learning. Then, as we move to the so-called endemic era, there is another phrase coming out, and that is the phrase like hybrid learning, blended learning, and so forth. Now, if you look at the literature on these two terminologies, hybrid and blended, there are two schools of thought. One group says that hybrid learning is different from blended learning. There's another school of thought which uses the word hybrid and blended interchangeably. But for our purpose here, I've joined these two words together and called it hybrid blended learning because it lends itself to a more flexible environment for us as practitioners. Now, what is hybrid blended learning, or HYBL? It's broadly defined as the mixing of online and in-person classroom learning when delivering a course or a subject. Now, the key words we'll be discussing here is two words: online learning and in-person learning. Okay. Now, this hybrid blended learning will vary according to time, place, the content, the pedagogy, and the assessment, which we'll be discussing in these few moments. Now, you look at this thing, hybrid blended learning. If you look at the slides, the first one, it is on the one is online learning, and there is the in-person learning. It is basically based on the definition. It's a switch back and forth between online and in-person learning, back and forth. And in this switch is seamless. Now, what do we mean? Now, I think best to describe the two extremes is to look at this diagram. On on the left is what we call the fully online approach. Now, I'll explain a little later what do you mean by fully online. That's another confusion. Then on the other extreme is the in-person. I think we all are familiar with the in-person classroom approach because we have been doing it in the last maybe 200-300 years. We have been doing where students are in front of us in the classroom, whether it be the university, colleges, classrooms, primary schools, right to kindergarten. Now, in between these two extremes is what we call hybrid blended learning. If you look at the first one, what we'll term is modalities. The first modality roughly divides about 2/3 is spent online and 1/3 is spent in-person interaction. The modality 2, hybrid blended learning modality 2, roughly it works out to about 50-50. Half the time is spent online and the other half is spent in person. Now, we borrow a phrase from the culinary arts that the secret is in the blend. How does an instructor or teacher decide how much of each? Now, this is a little graphic of in-person. We know what in-person learning. We use the word in-person at the moment. Some people use the word face-to-face and so on and so forth. In-person learning is a normal whole class method. The teacher stands in front of the class. You might break up to small group teaching, or you can have one-to-one teaching, peer-to-peer teaching. You can have practical sessions, you have labs, clinical workshops. This is the traditional way we have been doing things in person. Now suddenly COVID comes, we are suddenly asked to swing to the other end of the curriculum, of the continuum, that is online learning. Now, let me describe a little bit. Okay. Most of what I'm discussing here is what I have practiced, and my institution, Asia University, we are practicing most of these. And I've been doing this for the last 20 years, I think, in the area of online learning, distance learning, and blended learning or hybrid blended learning. And if you look at the one extreme is online learning. Now, there's a lot of interpretation of what is online learning. Here, it's usually online learning. It's not as simple as transferring your notes online. It's not like talking with PowerPoints. It is not necessarily giving a 3-hour lecture online, because it consists of a variety of elements in online learning. First and foremost is the content. I'll be discussing a little bit more detail about the content. And we advocate what we call a self-instructional module. So the student has a self-instructional module or textbook. There must be something to depend on. And then to support understanding of the content, you have lots of video clips. And these video clips cannot be length more than 5 to 7 minutes. The new generation does not want to listen to lengthy 3-hour lecture, 2-hour lectures on this. They want short video clips. This is I'm looking at the alpha generation today that are coming into our classroom. They're a different breed of learners. Then podcasts is a very good way to simulations. There's a lot of learning activities accompanying online learning. And then there are quizzes. Quizzes has come back. It's a very powerful tool for learning, slides and so on. So this is roughly a very brief description. You can use virtual labs if you need to, it's available. And there is the increasing emphasis on gamification. It's a very interesting area. I'll come to that a little later. Now, let me look at a few modalities of this hybrid blended learning. Now, this is the one extreme whereby when you talk of online learning, you could have what we call self-paced online learning, whereby the learner is all by himself, given all the materials, all the video clips, anything to help him understand. He or she is by themselves. And this is widely practiced today, especially among adult learners. They're very comfortable. I can do it online. But if you look at this modality, it's still online, but there is support in the form of synchronous face-to-face. Like what I'm doing now, this is synchronous. I use the word face-to-face, synchronous face-to-face. The teacher could use Zoom, could use Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and so on and so forth. Like we are using StreamYard here. So the teacher or the instructor interacts with a number of students, live interact. And then there is another one we call asynchronous. Asynchronous is just another word for delayed, later. So you can use email, WhatsApp, all the different social media tools you could use, Telegram. The forum is a very popular thing. And later I'll come to the learning management system. So you could have one modality. You still look at this, there is still no in-person interaction. It's still done online, but there is interaction. Now, later I'll present a theoretical basis for this. The second modality, this modality is where the student switches. He can be part online, studying online. He can study independently online, or he can study or learn collaboratively online. Then there is a point in which he comes to a physical space to do in-person learning. And this is sometimes called the flipped classroom. And the term used, do homework in school rather than do homework at home. So all the materials is provided, all the concepts are learned online. And he comes to school or any kind of institution, he comes to the physical space to work on problems, exercises, and so on and so forth. This is sometimes called the flipped classroom. Then there's a modality 3. Now, this is a case where he or she spends a large part of his time online, learning everything online. Just now I said about the video clips, the materials are all given. He can do quizzes. Everything is done online. Then he comes physically, usually for subjects or thing which requires very specialized learning spaces, and that is like a laboratory, a science laboratory. He's got to go to a workshop to work on something, and then he can go to another one. You could be a science, a computer lab, which has very specialized software, which he has to deal with, for example. Then it could be clinical, in person, and then the practicum, like in the teaching, that the learner has got to go to the schools to practice how to teach. And there's many permutations of this. So this is another example of hybrid blended learning. So there's online and then there is a fourth one, which is sometimes they call this hybrid learning, if you look at the literature, where because of the COVID and so on and so forth, you can't accommodate everybody in school or in a particular learning space. So you could have a case where half of the students are online, the other half are in person, and they may switch accordingly depending on the timetable and so on and so forth. So that is another, but still keep in mind, whenever we speak of online, it has to be very well organized. The online experience, the online space. Though he's online, but he's given a lot of support in learning. The key word is learning. Is he learning online? Because some of the reports that are coming out, studies are showing students having great difficulty. They might be in the online presence, but are they learning from online? And we don't want to go delve into that. Then there is another modality. This is maybe for certain disciplines, whereby they all come to the in-person, but they spend a certain time in the lab, in online in the lab. It could be usually the computer lab, as I said earlier, for specialized software and so on. And then they go for in-person physical thing. Now, these modalities are only a sample of the modalities of hybrid blended learning. There are many, many permutations within that continuum of one extreme online, the other extreme face-to-face. In between these two extremes, there are many permutations in which the instructor, the teacher will have to decide what's good for my course. What do I want for my course? How do I blend? That word, I think, is a good word. How do I blend online and in-person teaching? Now, I've developed a small theory for hybrid blended learning, which is an adaptation of two other models. One was about nearly 30 years ago by Moore's model, and Garrison, Anderson, and Archer's model of the community of inquiry. You see, at the end of the day, whatever we are doing, whether we are online or hybrid or in person, the ultimate aim is learning. So what do we want our students to know? If I'm teaching economics, if I'm teaching marketing, if I'm teaching chemistry, what do I want my students to know at the end of the day? So we call the core is the intended learning outcomes. And we always go back to good old Bloom's taxonomy way back in 1956. Bloom proposed the 6 levels of learning outcomes, which is still being used all over the world for subjects from primary school right up to university and even at the master's level. The intended learning outcome, the 6 levels of intended learning outcomes. Now, there's to create, you want your students to create, to evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, remember. That is something we all do if we are teachers. This is what we want our learners to do after a certain period of time, learning a particular subject or a course. Now, there are 3 types of interaction we want to focus on in this thing, whether it be online or whether it be in person. The first type of interaction is student content interaction. This is something we forget. You just imagine if I'm a poor kid doing online in some rural part of the country, my only source of information, of content is the textbook. I got one textbook for one subject. How do I go online with that if I have to be fully online? So how does he interact with the content? So this is something we have to look at very seriously, how the learner interacts with the content. What kind of activities do you have for him? What kind of quizzes do you have for him? What kind of videos do you have to explain the content? What kind of podcast do you have for him? Have you gamified the content so that he enjoys playing a game and learning? That's the student content interaction. Then there is the student. The student content interaction is called, sometimes described as, the 2 authors from the article, it's called cognitive presence. Cognitive presence. Cognitive means thinking. So cognitive presence, thinking, learning about the content. The next one is student content. Student interaction. Now that's called social presence. Now many students have been complaining that they like to go back to school because they're missing out on the student interaction. Now, how do we use the technologies available to enhance student interaction? For example, are we using social media? So these are the tools we use. If you're in in-person class, it's quite straightforward. The students are there, the students interact with each other on collaborative projects and so on and so forth. Now, can you do an online collaborative project to encourage student interaction? The third one is student-teacher. How does he interact with the teacher? How does he interact online? And in many contexts, many teachers have used all the video conferencing tools, your Zoom, your Teams, Google Meet, and a student-teacher interaction, and so on. And you can also have a WhatsApp with the student-teacher interaction. Now, around these 3 types of interaction, so when you design your hybrid course, your blended learning course, your hybrid blended learning course, keep in mind these 3 types of interaction. Around it is the 3 schools of thought. The 3 schools of thought on what is learning. The behaviorist, the cognitivist, and the constructivist. And we look at it, we combine the 3 fields. For example, if you want drill and practice, you want people to memorize, then we subscribe to the behaviorist. You want reinforcement, rewards and punishment, we go back to the behaviorist. The whole thing, it's a very wide field explaining human learning. How do we learn? Then the cognitivists. The cognitivists are people who look at long-term memory, short-term memory. How do you organize information? How do you have the learner organize information? Today, with technology, with so many technological tools, the cognitivist theories apply very appropriately. For example, you could, like using mind maps to organize your long-term memory, to facilitate recall, and so on and so forth. Then the constructivist. The constructivist is a body of theories which advocates that learning takes place only and when the learner constructs his own knowledge. In other words, you want the learner not to be one way. When you present information, it's only one way. He's a passive listener. He's actively interacting with the content and making sense of the content. Only then is the content, we call it, is owner. He owns the content. He ownership of the content. That's the feel of constructivism. There's a lot of information on these three things. So this is the model. If you want to build your online course, it serves as a kind of convenient model for you designing. Now, there's a bunch of skills. I think we should not ignore the 21st century skills. This is something, how do we do it in the online environment, in the hybrid, in the blended learning environment, or even the in-person environment? And that is communication skills. This is something has puzzled a lot of people. How do I teach communication skills? Later, I will look at some samples of activities which you can enhance communication of skills of learners online. Collaboration, this is a big thing. Now, then critical thinking, you know what critical thinking is? The ability to evaluate information. Creative thinking, innovative thinking, and lateral thinking, that comes under the fourth. So these 21st century skills, as an instructor, you should keep in mind, how do I include that in my course when I design the hybrid blended course, to include this kind of skills for things. Okay, so this is a very brief description of it. Let me get to the next one. Now, technology. Now, there's a lot of talk about technology, and there is the mistaken notion that technology is the silver bullet. Definitely is not. People get enthralled with the technology, and because of that, they forget that learning takes place because of the pedagogy, the art and science of teaching. That's what pedagogy is. So pedagogy should take supreme. Like if you look at the model just now I described, the key word is learning, and you look at how do I operationalize all those interactions in the classroom. That is pedagogy. Let's look at technology. I'll just take one example because I'm very familiar with this. We extensively use Moodle. Moodle is I love this learning management system. I've got about nearly 80 to 90 courses running on Moodle, which I manage in different fields, right from diploma right up to even to the PhD level also. Now, Moodle is open source, and it's free. You can download it. If you have a website, you can start a WordPress website. You can download Moodle, and you can run off e-learning course. You can do hybrid learning. You can do online learning. It's a very, very friendly learning management system, and it's continuing to upgrade it. I think the latest version will be out this year, end of this year, 2021, is called Moodle 4.0 with added features. Now, the purpose of a learning management system is to have a platform to deliver the course. The other one I must mention is obviously Google Classroom. That's also a very good learning management system. Google Classroom, I think, is used quite extensively by lots of educators. The Moodle is, you need a platform. So there is a platform for delivery of the courses. So it's a one-stop center where students come to, and they get everything they need. So imagine if your student is online without any support from the teacher, how important the learning management system is. You have to make it very, very comprehensive, and with the aim of helping the learner. Now, you can have video clips there, you can have audio clips there to support. Students can, I just give you briefly, students can submit assignments, and there are quite a bit of communication tools online there. You can have a video conferencing also through Moodle, and there are videos there. You can explain an assignment through a video, and then it automatically uploads itself to the learning management. You can have a chat, you can have a discussion, a message, discussion board. There's a discussion board, and there is a very powerful there are facilities for making quizzes, how you want to do quizzes for formative assessment, quizzes for summative assessment, all can be done, and a variety of quizzes many types of quizzes. And then there is a very good plugin there, H5P, which has a tool for gamification. You can gamify your interaction with your students, gamification using game-based principles. You can do video recording, audio recording on the thing, you don't need a third-party thing, a third-party tool. And then you can track the student. There is a tracking. You can track students' progress, what videos they watch, what they've downloaded, and so on and so forth. And then there is learning and analytics there. You can analyze how students perform on the quizzes, how frequently they come into your learning management system. You can check it out. And then you can even issue certificates of completion, certificate of achievement, and so on and so forth. Then there is a whole bunch of third party, I'll call them third party too, outside of the learning management system, which we have used quite extensive, like your Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams for the synchronous interaction with your learner. And then the asynchronous is all your WhatsApp, the asynchronous. Then there are certain tools which you can use for making quizzes and so on, Kahoots and all that kind. Now there is a slight, even though you have a live session, what we do is that after a live session, we record the live session and we upload it for students who missed out on things. It can be done on your on your learning management system. This is the way to think. Now, content. Borrowing a concept from marketing, content is king. Content is king. Sometimes people say engagement is queen. Now, Bill Gates said it in 2010 that 5 years from now we're in 2020, on the web for free, you'll be able to find the best lectures in the world. It will be better than any single university. Wow, that's quite a bit of a claim. But if you look at the rate at which content is being uploaded to the web and made available, I extensively use web content, even at the PhD level also. Because imagine for poor countries who cannot afford expensive databases for research articles, there are lots of research articles under what we call OER, Open Educational Resources. They are resources uploaded which generally allows you to reversion, repackage the materials for your own use without even asking consent from the author. So that there are different licenses under OER. Check out the one under Creative Commons. There are a few licenses, but how you can utilize OER. There are lots of textbooks online under OER which people can use. And obviously, video clips abundant. I'm a great user of YouTube because I find there are lots of good academic content which my students find very, very exciting to explain in 3 minutes what I would take about 10 minutes talking and explaining. That guy can explain in 5 minutes or 3 minutes the concept. And it can be played and replayed and so on and so forth. The podcast quite a bit. Articles abundant, research articles, position papers, case studies, reports, books reviews, quizzes available, slides, animations, infographics, so on and so forth. Ebooks, open source ebooks, or OER, Open Educational Resources. The movement is expanding now, and more people. It's nice to see so many authors who give their textbooks as open source materials, so you are free to use them. Virtual tours, field trips, literary works, and so on and so forth. This is all content available on the web. Now, I always ask myself, why do we want to reinvent the wheel? Can we use these resources besides our own notes, our own material that's yours? Can we use the resources on the web to complement what your body of knowledge you want to your students to learn? The must know content. So content is now there comes the skill. How do I balance the content? What content for online? What content for in person? How do I balance? That's another trick. Now, in the same breath of the content, this is one of the things that is advocated in the field of distance learning, online learning, hybrid blended learning, and so on, is the use of self-instructional modules. And this is a very good way whereby poor students who have to struggle with very limited content because they might be in the rural parts of the country, a self-instructional module of your discipline. So a self-instructional module in economics, a self-instructional module in chemistry 101 or beginning course, a self-instructional module in the history of Malaysia, for example. It's a self. It is different from a textbook because it is very clearly, it is like somebody said, described it as a tutorial in print, whereby the learner is guided through all. He's even taught, and the language used. I often cite Einstein. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. I think sometimes our content for the academically weak learner, he's struggling reading your textbook. He's struggling understanding the content because of his language skills. Not that he's lazy, his language skills are weak. So being an online learner where independent learning is top priority, it makes it worse. He will struggle. How do I read this material? How do I understand? How do I know that I know? And how do I know that I don't know? That's called metacognition. Now, this is where you have to help the learner. So the self-instruction module is a very, we have extensively used it, and we find the students, they like this, even the adult learners. How to study, how do you link to prior knowledge, show examples, and the material is chunked into smaller segments, unlike your lengthy textbook sometimes. So that helps. And usually we design these materials to fit the workload required. If it's a 12-week course, it's a 6-week course, it's a 1-week course, it's a 1-term course. How much do you have to cover? So the student knows exactly where you see. Layout is attractive, make it very attractive. The new generation likes infographics, that kind of stuff. And then interspersed are learning activities. Learning activities are things to do. So he will do it when he comes to an in-person setting, maybe. He learns online and he comes to the in-person, let's do the exercises. And so there's a whole bunch of things doing that. This is called a self-instructional module. Sometimes it's called a self-instructional material. Some people call it self-learning material, and so on and so forth. Now, this is an example of how I have done it with my courses, whereby I take out, say for example, you take a chapter from a textbook or a chapter from your SIM, a self-instructional module. This is the must-know content. This is the body of knowledge the student must know. And then to support, I use web resources. I use lots of video clips and so on, simulation, web pages, quizzes, images, animation, infographics, and all to reinforce very focused. What you see is what you get. Focus on what is to be learned, the must-know content. Usually they divide content as must-know content and good-to-know content, that kind of thing. I always remember that students have so many subjects to handle in a short period of time. When you look from the learner's point of view, you just throw him a 600-page textbook. How does he handle it? So that's why we decided no, we have limited time, and student has got so many subjects to cover, and how do we help him? At the end of the day, learning, not memorization. Has he learned? And learning means the Bloom's taxonomy. Can he apply? Can he evaluate? Can he create? Wow, that'd be lovely. With the content, can he create something new? That's the great desire of the whole exercise of education. Education is to create, innovate. Today, they want that today of our education system, not to memorize and regurgitate it in an examination. Okay, so the online pedagogy. Pedagogy is the art and science of teaching. So, art and science of teaching. Online pedagogy is just that. And so you design effective online enhancing learning of course content. You notice that I'm emphasizing all the time the content. How does he learn? At the end of the day, there's no point going through a whole program and I don't know what's going on. Okay, so these are the three types of design learning activities. You can do learning activities in person, you can do learning activities online, learning activities in a blended form to enhance student content interaction, student-student interaction, and student-teacher interaction. So this is the online pedagogy for blended learning. Now, these are samples of learning activities. Design, you can use presentations, making podcasts, reflective journals, quizzes, problem-solving exercise, virtual tours. These are all, the whole bunch of them. Depend on the level you're teaching, whether you're teaching primary school, secondary school, how do you utilize all these? Working with databases, online debates. You can have video recording. Today, everyone is a video recorder. Videographer, sorry. Everyone's a videographer because lots of people have handphones. So you can use handphones to record. You can have audio recording, video recording, critiquing articles. Articles are abundant on the web. Many of them are open educational resources. Students can use it. If you are in the university level, usually you have a large, you subscribe to databases, online databases, and students can have access to the online databases like your ProQuest, AppHost, and so on and so forth. Games and gamification. This is a very challenging area. It's a bit tricky how to do it, but it can be done quite easily through your learning management system like Moodle. You can do it through there, create graphics. You notice that all these learning activities are hands-on thing. They're hands-on. The student is doing something maybe with his hands, but definitely with his mind. He's working on it. He's not reading text. He's not just listening. He's manipulating with the content. That's playing around with the content. You ask him to keep a reflective journal. He's playing around with the content, making podcasts, playing around with the content. Take part in online posts, make a project. That's another interesting area I think we should emphasize. All levels of education where our people produce something innovative, regardless of subject area. Produce new things, innovative things, online database and so on. So virtual labs, if they're available. I know some of them are very expensive. Simulation, surveys, minute paper. Minute paper is a very popular thing in many Western education systems. They use the minute paper. Check it out what it is and so on. So this is the lots of activities for the student. Remember that to make the interaction, it is not one way the teacher, you talking for 3 hours or 2 hours on Zoom and the student is just listening. Then the last part, online assessment. Yeah, here's a big issue now. Because of the COVID, suddenly we are unable to have sit down on exams where you can put 300 people in a hall, control them, and have your traditional sit down exams. Now people are started rethinking assessment, reimagining assessment, and lots of issues come up. For example, people are thinking of take-home exams. Then the issue of credibility comes in, issue of the credibility of the answers and that kind of thing. Then you can have online exams. Now, online exams, there's a fear that some students who don't have access to the internet, don't have the tools, Can they come live to take the exams, etc.? So these are issues. These are all a lot of issues. I'm just throwing all these possibilities. Oral presentations, poster sessions, group projects, online using a wiki, for example. Portfolio, self-assessment. Now, this is something not widely practiced, but something to think about. Students' self-assessment, assessing their own thing. Surveys, interviews. These are all assessment. You can have interactive games and evaluate students and their performance. Innovation challenges. They can come up with something creative. There also is make the thing both a teaching tool as well as an assessment tool. Now remember, assessment usually we tend to divide it in assessment for learning and assessment of learning. Unfortunately, in many education systems, we are too carried away by assessment of learning. That's where you have a end of semester exam and end of term exam. That's assessment. But during the time the student is going through, what kind of assessment, which we call formative assessment, do we carry out to see the student knows how am I doing? Week 2, how am I doing? Week 4, how am I doing? I'm already halfway through the semester. How am I doing? So that is a formative assessment. So some of these tools can be used. And as usual, we are very, very much prone to just paper and pencil tests. Now with the COVID bug around, the paper and pencil test is being challenged. What alternatives have we got? So there's a whole host of alternative assessments. These are just samples of it. Even things like how to write a manual. If your course is such that you could get your students to write a manual, how to operate a particular machine or something like that. It's pretty interesting. So these are some of the things. Now, finally, just finally, I like to just go through briefly tips on designing and hybrid blended course. Now, the first and foremost is it is not transferring all your material you have, whether it be notes, slides. It's just transferring it to the online environment. It's much more than that. And it's a lot of designing required, a lot of thinking, designing, planning. So you design from scratch. And the key word here is how to get the seamless movement of learners from the online to the in-person. That's where the hybrid blended approach is all about, moving around. What portion is up to you, depending on your discipline. Obviously, go back to your learning outcomes. We always go back. What do you want your students to learn online? What do you want the students to learn in person when they come to class? Course description, focus on the must-know knowledge. And the other thing, the literature that is coming out, they find that many education systems give too much content to learners. Now, keep in mind, there is just a tendency when you move online or you move hybrid blended, there's a tendency for instructors to overload the curriculum, overload the course. So be wary of what to cover. I know your discipline requires you to cover the certain body of knowledge. So keep in mind, there's a new animal here, and can that student cover all in an online setting or a hybrid blended course? So that's something. The mix of media, where do you want to? The media means simulations, video clips. Somebody said the future of learning is through videos, and it's already happening to us. We all wait for in our WhatsApp. We are sending videos, forwarding, and kind of thing. The generation that is coming is so attuned to learning from videos. Everything they click. I always make a joke, but while you are lecturing or while you are teaching, everything that you say, he can find it on YouTube, or he can Google it. So sometimes you wonder, why do I need to copy notes when I go to your class when I can get it all from the web? I don't know. I can be challenged on that. Now, to divide the time, how do you divide time between in-person and online, the kind of thing, and designing the interaction? That is the key. The pedagogy is the key. The tools are there, so you have to select from the many tools. How do you get that kind of interaction? And and the other thing is that we found that you have got to make everything explicit to the learner. If he moves to this hybrid blended, he must be told everything. In we when we get our students to do assignment, we even tell them the font size. We tell them the font size and even the font type, and we even tell them, I only want this in 5 pages, 10 pages. You that kind of precision. And at the end of this, each assignment, why are you doing this assignment? The objective is there very clearly. So the assignment, these all are going to make explicit from us as being teachers, just walking into a classroom and just talking, or walking into a lecture hall and just talking. Suddenly we have to you have to go backwards a bit and look at this whole thing. Sometimes it's called a backward design. What do you want to achieve? You work backwards. Assessment, what type of assessment do you want, online and in person? And obviously the whole platform should be user friendly, easy to use, navigation, and it must be mobile friendly, because lots of students are learning using their handphone. Sometimes they have to use their father's handphone. A whole family of 5 use only one handphone. So how you keep that in mind? Okay, so that's about it I have in the time given. Any questions? Let me look at some of the questions that have come in, and I'll spend the next about 20 minutes or so. Good afternoon. Yes. Oh, let me see. Anybody ask questions? Any comments? Oh, no far. Wait, let me look. Oh, no questions. No. Hmm. Uh, Somebody said need lots of refinement to effectively keep on doing this mode of learning through the COVID. Yes, there is it's a cycle. It's iterative. You go back and this thing. It's not a final thing. But the nice thing about it, once you have designed the thing, it is can be used over and over again, and you just tweak it as you go along, update the materials and so on. Okay, that's true. You can it's a lot of super. Uh, Digital literacy is mandatory for all these models. Yes, digital literacy. Now comes the word, what is digital literacy actually? So you have to define. Be careful. There is the studies have shown that even though the new generation are young people and they are born with the internet, especially the alpha generation and the millennials born together with the internet, they don't necessarily are savvy in using technology when it comes to learning. They're not necessarily surgeons. They might be good with their Facebook, they're good at their WhatsApp and Telegram and all that. But when it comes to learning online, there needs to be some form of orientation to them. To help, they need some orientation. What's it like learning online, and especially in terms of time management. This this whole thing shift to the online environment using technology, hybrid, blended learning, and so forth, it is slowly training our learners to be independent learners, self learners. Sometimes the word used self-regulated learners, regulation. It is in contrast to the early days where a person walked in the classroom, listened to the teacher gave everything, practically what you use, what we call spoon feeding. Whether it be a lecture, also same thing. He lectures for 2 hours, 3 hours. That thing has shifted to the learner becoming independent. And I think it's good in the sense that the independent learning is where will lead to what we call lifelong learning, that he will continue to learn even after he has left the school system or the university and so on. So that is something new to many of our learners, how to learn online and being a self-regulated learner, which basically means studying on my own, looking for my own. Okay. Now, said how somebody asked the question, how the two can be differentiated. That's why a good question. I'm avoiding, when you look at the literature, some people say they are different. Hybrid is different from blended. There's another group says they are in use interchangeably. They're similar. I think what I've done is that I've joined the two and taken the best from both, hybrid, blended. And then it depends the modalities. I think there may be about maybe 50, 60 modalities between the two extremes. You decide. You are keep in mind, you have the two. How do you want to blend the two or hybrid the two? It's just like coming out with a new orchid plant. You hybrid the two plants to produce something new. In a way, you are. You're taking the best of online learning. You're taking the best of in-person learning and putting it together for your course. So it is, I think don't split hairs with it. If you read the literature, you get confused sometimes. Okay. Okay, thanks, some of you. How different is this theory applied to young or adult learners? Yes, this theory is generic. You can even use it at kindergarten level. It's just a theory for you to design your course. Remember the 3 types of interaction and your learning out. What do you want the kids to know? You want the kids to learn how to read and write. You want the kids to learn basic mathematics if you're at the lower level. Or you want a person in a university learn about marketing. He wants to know the different piece or the different the marketing mix, for example. Just a simple example. You want them to know that. So that's a whole range of it. It's all there. So you have to design the courses, pick. And I find that if you're in the lower levels, there is a very good website called Pinterest. I think it's now listed in the stock market. Pinterest is excellent, gives you so many ideas how to teach primary school and kindergarten. It's just Google Pinterest and just type in what you're teaching: mathematics, teaching social emotional development, teaching or anything for kids. So that's an example. Lots of activities. I think we should remember that I think we are guilty sometimes, whether it's good or bad, that the COVID has made us rethink how we teach. Rethink, asking ourselves, are we doing it right? Is there another way to do it? And there's a lot of ideas from the web. Okay. What else here? Any question? I agree strongly this search can be done by Google because as a private student, local resources are few. Agreed. This is the challenge for us. I have to admit, most of the resources on the web are in English. So I don't know in the other languages how much resources is available. And there is a tendency for lots of resources to come from the United States because the beauty of that, there's a lot of sharing of good resources. So maybe what we should do, we look at these resources and adapt them to our setting. And you'll be surprised sometimes. Don't underestimate your own country. That if you carefully search the web, there are some good stuff people in our own country have uploaded. Only thing, the searching part is scattered all over in the billions of pages. How do you take them and link them, hyperlink them to this thing? Okay. Yeah, people are complaining about local research. Yes, I think it's not there is no local research. The local research tends to be kept in the libraries, and I think much of them is still in the physical state in the journals or local libraries. So you have to go to the local libraries. But there is a slow movement towards making it available on the web, on the digitally, and making it available so-called free for people to access. I think maybe that should be a target for making all our local resources available on the web. So the web is going to be interesting. Higher order thinking skills will flourish, yes. Practical approach, okay, somebody said. Thanks for explaining. Okay. Nobody has asked for us. Okay. Uh, Pinterest, yeah, somebody has said Pinterest, lots of ideas for hands-on activity. You'll be surprised, even the Pinterest it gives you ideas even for university things. Okay, that's about it, I think. Anyway, as many students are learning on their subjects online, how do we overcome online fatigue? Yes, this is the biggest. There's even the term Zoom fatigue. Zoom fatigue. Some people, then online fatigue. I think, in my experiences, I found most of my students, adult learners, they'll be comfortable with not more than maybe 2 hours listening to me, or 1.5 hours. So I think we should play the game of a balance between the what do you want to teach through your, when you say usually the fatigue comes from listening to the teacher online. So just imagine listening for 2 hours to a teacher online. And then with the limit, some of them have their data plan is limited, instability of internet connection. So I think this is where, when you plan the lesson, what is it you want to do through video conferencing? And I think you got to make it short. And what is it? You can put it in the self-instructional module where the student can learn alone. It's a balance between coming live and self-regulated learning on its own, independent learning. And independent learning is not just throwing a textbook at him or throwing a bunch of exercises for him to do. It's got to be organized. And he knows where he's doing. So if you reduce that, imagine he just 5, 6 subjects. The Zoom fatigue that comes comes in, the fatigue that comes in with too lengthy online sessions. I think the new generation, I have to say this, I don't think they can last very long with long video sessions. They're a generation, sometimes they call it the pancake generation. This is the generation that wants it in chunks. I've got another video which I presented on that. They want it in chunks, they want it in immediate application, show me how it applies, and they want it in small, they call it bite size. That's the word, bite size. Now, what is bite size? You determine. You are the teacher, you are the expert, you are the instructor. How do you go about it? Okay. Okay. How do we implement effective assessments, evaluation using a? Okay, assessments. You go back. You have to go back to your learning outcomes, your subject learning outcomes. If the school, if you look at the school level, you have broken down your curriculum into standards. Quite a number have broken down the standards. Say, for example, a particular subject area, the standards. This sometimes the standard, and that standards sometimes becomes your learning outcome. So, for a particular topic, say we got 15 topics. At the topic level, your learning outcomes, what we do is that we have learning outcomes at the topic level. So you evaluate the topic, the learning outcomes. And when you evaluate the learning, you decide what is good, what will serve better. Maybe I want him to do a small survey. I want him to interview certain people. I want him to do an observation, him or her, do an observation. So these are all the alternate, various kinds of assessment methods, depending on. Sometimes as simple as prepare a presentation. Say you're going to give a talk to parents on something. Prepare a set of slides, and how would you present it? That's all your learning out. If your learning outcome is the ability to apply information, how do you measure application? How do you measure evaluation? How do you measure creativity? So you could go back to your learning outcomes. There's a move now, in some sense they call it competency based education. So that's another area which some are recommending for the education system. You must acquire certain competencies, and those competencies are measured in the assessment. Okay. Anything else? Maybe I need to stop here. I hope it's been used. Okay. I think I will end here, and you can continue. This I think this video will be available online. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention.